Affordable housing, senior housing, HUD housing, non-existent. We just did not have the financial resources to pay application fees, moving costs, and deposits, first and last month's rent. A couple residents had no credit cards and thus no credit rating for credit checks. We faced being priced right out of our neighborhood and possibly right out of our city. We lived in limbo for over a year while the landlord kept us in the dark. Mr. Wells raised our rents 20%. He stopped taking such good care of the property. There was a steady stream of surveyors, real estate agents, and the curious, some poking about suspiciously in the guarding. We grew agitated, on edge. I went to City Council, Tenants Union, Center for Justice, SNAP, and Housing Authority. Called many people who never bothered to call me back. Told everybody, literally I ran into, what was happening in my neighborhood. I posted on Nextdoor and heard others' sad tales of displacement. I remember the unkind comments, how I'm living in nostalgia, that change is imminent, that if I can't afford to live here, I shouldn't be here, that it's my fault I'm poor. I managed to organize my neighbors with the help of the tenants union. They were a reluctant lot who felt loyal to Mr. Wells and didn't want to make waves for him, cause him distress. Conversely, he felt no loyalty to us, reminding us that at our meeting that despite our good record with him, in his past experience, low-income tenants had caused nothing but damage and disaster for him. He did concede some things, but only what would serve his best interest. Sure, we got to move out in the spring instead of the winter, but the housing market was worse than ever, and he was liberal with giving our deposits back. Nobody nitpicked. And sure, we were offered first pick of a few places if we wanted to pay $100 to $300 more a month and downsize to half or less space in high crime neighborhoods. The Ridpath downtown was an unfulfilled promise. It was more money for less space, and we would have to pay for parking off-site, $130+. I couldn't imagine how I would manage with groceries and getting back and forth across icy sidewalks to my car in the winter. Before this happened, we were safe, comfortable, secure, independent, but the inflated housing costs threatened to slap us kicking and screaming right into homelessness and/or welfare's lap. Over the months, I was witness to the slow, sad whittling down of each person's life. We had a communal pile in the hallway that we took to the UGM. Prized and utilitarian objects appeared. How do you sell off or give away your grandmother's handmade table, your lifetime collection of tools, or the leather motorcycle vest that belonged to your dead husband? Everyone eventually found housing, even if it was temporary. I don't know how they are doing 6 months later. I've been displaced and living in uncertainty since June, when I turned a 600 square foot, one-bedroom apartment into a 7x7 pod in the valley. I don't even want to think about the things I sold, including heirlooms, or gave away, or how much it's going to cost to replace them. I stayed with my mom and did try to find a place in Spokane, but everything affordable was further out of city limits. Inside the city, decent places would cost me close to half my income. I did qualify to buy something under $100,000, but every house I looked at needed at least $30,000 worth of rehab, which was beyond my physical abilities and my pocketbook. I finally left for Florida to live with my daughter. If I can find a place and decide to stay, I'll get my Florida driver's license and send for my stuff. Ironically, the month I moved out of Finch Hall, I released my first novel, writing most of it in the solitude of the quiet, century-old building as I looked out on the garden, from the fiery brilliance of fall to the silent architecture of winter snow and ice, to the glorious return of the sun in the spring. I took many walks and bike rides along Centennial Trail to the Monroe Street Bridge, sat on that bench overlooking the river 1,000 times. Officially, I am a Spokane author, a Washington State indie author. My book is available at local shops and all the branches of Seattle Public Library and the Spokane County branches as well. I'm no exception. I've talked to a lot of people, and there's a bunch out there barely hanging on in Spokane. When I had my garage sale, people came from some of the larger, more expensive nearby homes, and we had many conversations about how even they were feeling the chipping away of their stability. I also know a lot of artists, writers, musicians, and filmmakers trying to stay in Spokane and stay independent, productive, to make art, to raise families. It's tragic that the lack of vision and planning by the city, the lack of laws to protect tenants, and the giving in to greedy developers, among other economic issues, has made it way too easy for the vulnerable to slide into crisis. I read on Facebook a while back that someone had commissioned a statue commemorating a victorious event for women in some Eastern European country, which is slated to stand in Kendall Yards. I'm sure it will be wonderful and add to the cosmopolitan, upscale feel of the development, the bold new city of Spokane. I wonder, though, who will tell our stories? Sonia Monger.
I met the landlord, I kept my soul, and in mind, he was ashen and cold. Spoke with confusion, bottled me up, left me for hollow, and he died his son. I bore all his load till the day that we met, and one glimpse of you bent the load from my friend to my frown to my stern, and then rocking me by and a game and a jig on the other side.
Okay, so you'll have to forgive me here with some of this because I'm not some of it is in handwriting, so I may stumble a little bit here and there, and I may get a little bit confused, and I'm hoping that I can read it clearly so that you can understand it. But this one starts off: housing is a human right, and we are the humans affected. We are representing a vast majority of citizens of Spokane. We pay our rent, we take care of the premises, and we do not engage in antisocial behavior. We are rent burdened. I am a single mother, and I spent 60% of my income on rent, not including electricity. I did not even try to register for a housing voucher because I knew there would be years of waiting. 50% of Spokane renters are cost burdened, which means they pay more than 30% of their salary on rent. 27% of the renters in Spokane are severely cost burdened, meaning they pay more than 50% of their income on rent. If half the city are renters, 50%, then nearly 60,000 residents are living well beyond their means. This is my family. Knock-on effect is the knock. Okay, so basically she's saying that the side effect of this is that there's no money for entertainment or regular expenses, no possibility for savings. And then she says it's not irresponsibility, it is the reality of working people. She says we are displaced. I have moved 3 times since August 2017. Rent gouging forced our last move because I could not afford the increase of $1,050 to $1,200. Transience does not benefit communities. When people have no ties, there is more crime and property damage, and smaller towns are feeling the pressure as well. Solutions: 1. Universal background checks. Streamline and simplify the process for everyone. We need increased notices, more than 30 days for rent increases. I had 2 months and I was 15 hours away from being homeless. Part of that is that there's less than 1% vacancy rating. Basically, the vacancy in Spokane is just people who are in the process of moving or moving out. Those are the vacancies that are available in Spokane right now. We need increased notice, more than 30 days for rent increases. I had 2 months and I was 15 hours away from being homeless. I already read that. Deposits in the last month should be paid in installments to allow rent-burdened tenants time to manage costs. In a low occupancy housing situation, we need to agree that rent increases more than 10% are unsustainable. We look forward to collaborating together.
Till the Lord wasn't there, and he never when all was before was so distant a dream, till I saw in my friend what had once been my foe, and the terrible landlord had all in his soul.
My name is Lonnie Jordan. I was a tenant of George Janowski in Southside Investments. I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment with my brother where we paid $800 a month in rent on the lower South Hill. A few months ago, my brother and I noticed that we were getting a lot of bug bites and reported it to George, and there were bed bugs in the apartment. We attempted to get rid of them ourselves, but about a month later we were served with a 20-day notice to vacate. Everyone in my building got the same notice. Now, I helped him prepare this, but it wasn't everyone in his building. It was him, a Hawaiian family, a couple that had, I think, 2 children, and a single mother of 3. Those are the people that he kicked out because there was a complaint that there was bed bugs, and he decided that those were... this is my assumption, so we'll make that clear right now, but... I assume that he decided that those were the dirty people and those were the unclean people, and he wanted them out. He probably didn't like their kids. He didn't like them. I can say at least one tenant felt like there was maybe some racism involved. I'm not, I don't know for sure if that was the case, but I think he is a very judgmental landlord. If you look at his videos online, he says things like, "We only rent to the finest tenants," which isn't necessarily true. I mean, he just keeps jacking up the rent to try because he thinks that people that have more money are gonna take better care of the place. But I'm a house painter, and I work for several landlords, and I can tell you there's not a whole lot of difference between what poor tenants do and people that are paying like $1,200 to $1,500 a month for a house, because I've seen some houses that were just destroyed by essentially lower middle class people that are probably average income. So that was my mistake, and he did correct that when he read it. He had his own notes and everything, and I don't have the edited version, so I'll try to clear things up as I go. He says, "My brother moved, but I was working up to 6 days a week as a housekeeper and was not able to find the time or the money to get a place on my own. I had nowhere to go and no idea what I was going to do. I only knew that I had 20 days to do it. The 20 days were up and I was still unable to find a place and had nowhere to take my things. Because I couldn't find a place, George gave me a 3-day eviction notice, and 3 days later he showed up with the police, and they gave me 5 minutes to gather whatever belongings I could gather, and I was out on the street. I had done nothing wrong. All I did was tell him that there were bed bugs, and our neighbors said that they had bed bugs in this building before. I now have an eviction on my record. This will show up whenever I apply for a new place. On top of all this, George charged me $1,600 in late fees, which I paid. He tried to get me to pay him $2,400 for his lawyer fees as well. I pled with him that $1,600 was all that I had. He took it from me. I was left with nothing. Man, fuck him, dude. Like, I don't want to... just a fucking piece of shit, dude. Like, just a wretched fucking human being. And this goes beyond the shitty dealings that you have with landlords because it's just a business move, where they just do business things. This is actual fucking hatred and spite. George does not need this fucking money. He could look at this kid and say, "I'm sorry that things didn't work out. Why don't we just part ways? You go your way, I'll go mine." But instead, he had to make this kid, this struggling fucking kid, pay everything he owned and put him out on the fucking street. Just cold, callous, heartless, scumbag fucking bullshit. So, I'll continue. If I had been protected with just cause, or at the very least been paid for relocation, I could still have my own place to live. But as things are now, I